Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. Last night, you may have seen the presidential debate. Some of you may have avoided it, but you would be in the minority because many people think that there may have been as many people watching it as would watch a Super Bowl event. And so we're going to spend some time, obviously, hearing a few of the comments by Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but also really trying to give you some perspective, some analysis, and most importantly, all sorts of things that never. We're just thrilled once again. Around the round table, we have Debbie Georgatos. And again, you're familiar with her radio show, America, Can We Talk? And of course, you used to call it Ladies, Can We Talk? Still have the book by that. Nick Pitt's with us as well with the Denison Forum. And it's just going to be a great opportunity to kind of work our way through some of these clips and some of the comments. But let's get some initial reaction. Debbie, what did you think about last night?
I actually think it's a wonderful thing about America that many people watched. I'm sorry that so many people wait till after Labor Day to even tune in. And I thought really the performance by both candidates was pretty predictable. I mean, Hillary was her very wonky, substantive, let me tell my bullet point self. I think she should abandon the effort to appear warm because she just can't. That's just not who she is. And so she kind of carried that out. I thought there were many missed opportunities, especially by Donald Trump. And he got a little carried away defending himself, which is unfortunate because he had a lot of things he could and should have said. Starting with the very first question by the moderator, Lester Holt, when he started out saying, well, the economy's booming, guys. So, that was more or less what he said. What do you say about that? I was thinking, does Donald Trump, does he have this at the tip of his tongue? Whatever. The growth rate's under 2%. The labor force participation rate is Carter-era malaise. Come on. This is not a booming economy. These are fictional numbers put out by the federal government. But Donald Trump wasn't ready to say that. That was my missed opportunity number one.
As if trade's going to solve a less than 1% growth. But let's get to this. Nick Pitts, first of all, we love what you do there at the Denison Forum. We've actually posted one of the pieces by your boss, Jim Denison, today, so people can read that. Posted one by the Wall Street Journal on the underwhelming Trump-Clinton debate. But also love to have, not only because you've got such a keen mind, but you're one of those millennials we talk about. So give us some perspective there, what you were thinking about watching this debate.
Yeah, well, Kerby, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be in the big league, right? I guess we're in the big league or the big league, I guess is the speculation would go. And like Debbie, I would say I was very encouraged just by the sheer predictable numbers that are going to be tuning in. I mean, very much spend a lot of my time on the research on the 1960 presidential campaign.
Yeah, that's going to be your PhD thesis.
Yeah, and with 160 million people in 1960, over 70 million people casted their ballots. So I'm really interested to see if this 100 million people of the 300 million people that exist in the U.S. are going to be casting their ballots to double what happened in 2012.
But of course, what we're dealing with are the two most unpopular candidates we probably have had in modern times. Yeah. So this is something else to think about as well.
So hopefully visceral reaction causes them to go to the ballot box because more votes is always a good thing.
I've got to wonder if, as she walked out the stage, Hillary Clinton said to some of her aides, who orchestrated this? Spent an entire 8 minutes on the birther issue, and no one even asked me about Benghazi. We spent more than 5 minutes on Donald Trump's tax issue, and nobody even brought up the Clinton Foundation and all these other issues that I was sure I was going to have to answer. And she probably turned to one of them and said, okay, which one of you bribed Lester Holt? Because there were so many things that were not discussed last night, not the least of which the one issue that many people are going to vote vote on, Debbie, and that is the Supreme Court nominees. If there is any stark difference between these two candidates, it's who they would put on the court and how they would affect the culture and the country for the next 20 or 30 years.
As they say, no truer words have been spoken. It is an extremely important issue, not just to Christian Americans, but just conservative Americans, constitutionalists, people who see the court as drifting further and further away from the roots in the Constitution. So it is a huge issue, and that is one there's actually a specific difference that they could lay out. So it is one of those I think Donald Trump should have had on his short list, because you can answer the question, what'd you have for Thanksgiving dinner with? Let me name my top choices. You need, for the Supreme Court, you need to be able to get to the issues you want to talk about, and that should have been one of them, because it's a big difference, and what Hillary will do will continue the growth of the power of the judiciary beyond what's supposed to be within our limited government.
Let me ask an expert here on the Kennedy-Nixon debates and some of those issues there. Again, some people do make their decision upon how a person looks, whether they look calm, whether they look defensive, whether they seem to be in command of the facts. Did that have any influence on you or other viewers, you think?
Politico came out with a phenomenal piece early Monday that talked about how the first 30 minutes is where you win or lose a debate.
Right.
And the first 30 minutes, if that proves to be true, Trump was very strong that first 30 minutes.
He really
of the
was.
debate.
And I think some people may have tuned out because after a while, I'm a policy wonk and I was getting kind of bored.
Yeah.
I don't know about, maybe Debbie stayed through it. I did, but just barely. And it's just tough, even for 90 minutes.
Yeah. And as we saw, as Debbie was alluding to, that last 60 minutes of the debate, I love the analogy that Richard Lauer uses in the National Review. He says that Clinton functioned as a matador.
Yeah.
That really, she just allowed him to be able to be the bull that just kind of went after one thing after the other, and she just backed away.
Yeah, John Smerick put it this way. He was saying every time she attacked something you hold dear, like your business acumen, you took the bait and swam right up to the surface where she could spear you. And the Wall Street Journal said something similar, but, whether we're talking matador or fisherman, this was not a good thing for those last 60 minutes for Donald Trump.
It wasn't, and I have to guess it's one of the main things that he was coached about. He didn't prepare in the way that Hillary did with mock presentations and someone playing the role of Trump. She went through all that, had psychologists come in and talk about, how to push his buttons. But he did prepare in the issues and the substance. And I'm sure with all of those experts around him, someone said, don't take her bait. Every pundit in America has been talking about it, and I'm sure he heard that message. It's like he didn't connect the dots. He didn't recognize, this is what I'm doing right here. He just thought, she's making fun of my business. She's challenging me for declaring bankruptcy. And it really is a shame because he had a lot of things he could and should have said. He spent way too much time in the birther issue, which I think exactly 0% of America actually cares about. He should just said, Hillary, the entire world knows now that your campaign under Sid Blumenthal in 2008, you were the one that raised the issue. Done. And that's the last time we should ever talk about it in this election cycle.
Yeah, sort of. Again, the Wall Street Journal put it this way. Sure enough, Mr. Trump took the bait, wasting time on details about his company's history while barely going on the offense against the Clinton Foundation. So that was generally the consensus. We're going to take a break, though. When we come back, we want to talk about some of those. And that opening salvo was about the economy. And, of course, Hillary Clinton came back and called it trumped-up, trickle-down economics. So we need to talk a little bit about economic policy. We're going to talk about tax cuts and the idea of bringing back jobs and those kinds of things. And then, of course, he made some comments about NAFTA. Of course, remember who actually signed that. That was her husband. And then, of course, the issue of law and order, stop and frisk. We'll get into those issues. Then, of course, whether or not he's going to release his taxes and his tax forms and those kinds of things. And he said he will if she releases her emails. So we'll see what that
was
comment
brilliant.
is. And then finally, with some of her comments about the emails. So we have a lot to talk about today. But if you would like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We have Debbie Georgatos with us, Nick Pitts today, around the round table, and we have some articles that we really encourage you to maybe read. It gives you a little more perspective on some of the things that you might have heard about last night or seen, and whether you saw the debate or not, we'd love to get some of your comments because this is now in the election season, the first of 3 presidential debates, and after watching some of them, I'm also eager to see the vice presidential debates. It's amazing both of them lasted for 90 minutes, but I think we're going to have to pay attention who the vice president is, too. And we'll talk about all that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
In just a few days, the nation's strictest LGBT non-discrimination laws will go into effect in Massachusetts. According to the latest pronouncements from the state government, even churches and Christian schools will be affected since they are defined as public accommodations. Any accommodation must allow patrons to use men or women's restrooms as well as locker rooms and changing rooms that are consistent with their gender identity. Moreover, it requires that these venues must also use names, pronouns, and gender-related terms appropriate to employees' stated gender identity in communications with the employee and with others. As Christians, we believe that sex and gender are essentially the same thing, but the Massachusetts law instead defines gender identity as a person's gender-related identity, appearance, or behavior, whether or not that gender-related identity, appearance, or behavior is different from that traditionally associated with a person's physiology or assigned sex at birth. It doesn't take much imagination to see where conflicts will arise between this latest transgender law and Christian teaching and church programs. Most churches hold events that are considered to be open to the public. Churches will probably welcome people of any sexual orientation, but they will probably balk at opening up their locker rooms or bathroom facilities for transgendered people. They might find it difficult to use pronouns that are not consistent with biology. And if pastors and teachers in Massachusetts churches teach on various biblical passages, a transgender person could take the church to court over the content of the sermon or Sunday school lesson. Massachusetts was the first state to grant same-sex marriages. It now might be the first state with a lawsuit against a church over transgender issues, and that case might make it all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Post-debate analysis today, and we have in studio with us Debbie Georgatos as well as Nick Pitts, and might also mention that we have links to both of their websites. So if you want to find out a little bit more about Debbie's website and radio program, we have that link. If you'd like to find out more about the Denison Forum on Truth and Culture, and you really do, because I get that email every single day, got some of them right here as a matter of fact, that's another resource that we'll talk more about in just a minute. Let's get into at least a few of the comments, and this one has to do with this idea of the trickle-down economics. I guess we should have expected Hillary Clinton to use that, but if you want to grow the economy, you've got to change the tax structure. And as soon as Donald Trump said that, then here's what Hillary Clinton had to say.
The kind of plan that Donald has put forth would be trickle-down economics all over again. In fact, it would be the most extreme version, the biggest tax cuts for the top percent of the people in this country than we've ever had. I call it trumped up trickle down, because that's exactly what it would be. That is not how we grow the economy. We just have a different view of the economy, how we make investments that will actually. I think we come at it from somewhat different perspectives. I understand that. You know, Donald was very fortunate in his life, and that's all to his benefit. He started his business with $14 million borrowed from his father, and he really believes that the more you help wealthy people, the better off we'll be, and that everything will work out from there. I don't buy that.
My father gave me a very small loan in 1975, and I built it into a company that's worth many, many billions of dollars with some of the greatest assets in the world. And I say that only because that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. Our country's in deep trouble. We don't know what we're doing when it comes to devaluations, and all of these countries all over the world, especially China, they're the best ever at it. What they're doing to us is a very, very sad thing. So we have to do that. We have to renegotiate our trade deals. And Lester, they're taking our jobs, they're giving incentives, they're doing things that, frankly, we don't do.
So again, just a little bit of a sense of the back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. But again, let me come around the round table. If you are concerned about businesses going overseas and individuals, even Apple now moving some of their operations to Ireland, well, if you have 15% corporate income tax in Ireland, you have 30% here or more by the time you add the state income taxes and things like that. It's not hard to understand that if we want to be competing in a world economy, we've got to think about changing the tax structure. What are your thoughts?
Amen to that also. You know, it's really interesting. I did agree with one thing Hillary said, which is that she and Donald Trump approached these tax issues or solving the employment problem from a very different perspective. What she's really talking about is it's basic socialism. She's talking about we're just going to gather resources from people who work hard and we're just going to spread it around to create other jobs. When she says making investments, she means I'm investing you, the hardworking American, you earn money in somebody else over here. That's not creating real jobs. That's funny money jobs. So I think, and I also think there's got to be a better answer on behalf, not just Donald Trump, but any conservative has to be able to answer that. Trickle-down economics, they made that term years ago, the left did, as to talk about what they're really saying is free market doesn't work. Free markets don't work. Low taxes and incentivizing businesses to grow and hire people, which is the bread and butter of a free market economy. She's saying she doesn't believe in that. And so I think he needs to call her on that and just say, what you're talking about is getting to socialism. I'm talking about is free markets. And that's what America is. We're about entrepreneurship and freedom.
And when she says investments, he needs to say, you mean taxes. I mean, there are certain times when he interrupted too many times, but that'd be one good time when you say, no, you mean taxes, because these, quote, investments are taxes. And he reminded us, we had a caller yesterday said, I wonder if anybody will talk about the fact that we're almost $20 trillion in debt. Well, somebody kept bringing that up, and that's a question that you need to ask Hillary Clinton or anybody else, or even Donald Trump. If you're going to spend money, where's that coming from? Mm-hmm. We put $20 trillion debt on your backs, those of you in the millennial generation, which is horrible that what we've done to you guys.
We greatly appreciate it, and that is said with tongue in cheek. And speaking to trumped up trickle down, that was kind of a word twister. I thought John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt was the one that created that, but nevertheless, I mean, I think it really does. I think this is where Trump did really well, and the fact that he was able to point to individual experience about how he was able to utilize his freedom, because government is just our shared project to protect our freedoms, to be able to use his freedom, invest wisely in order to work for the betterment of America.
Let me put one more economic one on, but Debbie has a comment. So
just a quick thing. It would have been great if Donald Trump had asked her, well, Hillary, yes, I made money in the private sector by building buildings, employing people. How did you get so wealthy since the time you left, since you were broke when you left the White House, since your husband ended his presidency? How did you get so wealthy? Because she did, off the back, because of making deals with Wall Street and getting money in the Clinton Foundation, which are not things she brags about, but he should be pointing that out.
Yeah. Matter of fact, if you want to have the same kind of wealth that I have, just keep speaking to these banks and just keep doing the Clinton Foundation. Someday you'll have as much money as I, he could have said all sorts of things. He didn't. Anyway, one more on the economy, and then we're going to take lots of phone calls. Matter of fact, almost a full bank of phone calls already. But let's also talk about this idea of tax cuts, bringing back jobs, and what about all this money that's overseas that could be repatriated? Here's what Donald Trump had to say.
Well, I'm really calling for major jobs, because the wealthy are going to create tremendous jobs. They're going to expand their companies. They're going to do a tremendous job. I'm getting rid of the carried interest provision. And if you really look, it's not a tax. It's really not a great thing for the wealthy. It's a great thing for the middle class. It's a great thing for companies to expand. And when these people are going to put billions and billions of dollars into companies, and when they're going to bring $2.5 trillion back from overseas, where they can't bring the money back because politicians like Secretary Clinton won't allow them to bring the money back because the taxes are so onerous and the bureaucratic red tape is so bad. So what they're doing is they're leaving our country, and they're, believe it or not, leaving because taxes are too high and because some of them have lots of money outside of our country, and instead of bringing it back and putting the money to work because they can't work out a deal and everybody agrees it should be brought back. Instead of that, they're leaving our country to get their money because they can't bring their money back into our country because of bureaucratic red tape, because they can't get together, because we have a president that can't sit them around a table and get them to approve something. And here's the thing. Republicans and Democrats agree that this should be done.
We've looked at your tax proposals. I don't see changes in the corporate tax rates or the kinds of proposals you're referring to that would cause the repatriation, bringing back of money that's stranded overseas. I happen to support that. I happen to support that in a way that will actually work to our benefit. But when I look at what you have proposed, you have what is called now the Trump loophole, because it would so advantage you and the business you do. You've proposed an approach that has a $4 billion tax benefit for your family. And when you look at what you are proposing, it is, as I said, trumped up trickle down. Trickle down did not work. It got us into the mess we were in 2008 and 9.
That's one that should have been challenged right there, because it wasn't trickle-down economics that caused the banking crisis in 2008 and the major downturn. That was something else, wasn't it, Debbie?
Absolutely, it was. I want to make sure and say I don't know what she meant by Trump loophole. I made a note when we were listening to that because I didn't. I had not heard that, and I've been pretty thorough reading things.
Yeah.
But yeah, the entire crisis we faced in 2008, 2009, I think we talked about in the show before, but it was not caused by free market economic ideas. It was not caused by trickle down economics. There were a lot of problems, including in part it was the home loan. I can't think of the name of the.
Yeah, of course you had Glass-Steagall and you had all that
stuff,
and the community reinvestment and all those.
That was the one. Community reinvestment was a huge problem.
Yeah.
All that to say, it was government meddling in private in what should have been more private sector economics that caused a problem to start with. But again, you have to be ready to say those things on the tip of your tongue. Be very, very quick about it.
And again, even if you said all that, everybody go, well, whatever. I don't even know what that means. Matt, Nick, any comments real quick?
I think again it just points back to he's got to be able to come back with those things pretty quickly. And he kind of missed an opportunity there.
Well, and again, there are some others, but this probably will be the most watched one. And of course, as you said, that first half hour might have been all he needed to at least keep it going. But we'll watch and see what this does in terms of the polls. And certainly the most important poll happens November 8th. But let's take a break, come back and take some phone calls. There's some people been waiting a long time to make some comments. We'll give them a chance. But then we'll talk about how they went back and forth on issues of trade and NAFTA. What about law and order? I knew that was going to come up, as if really the president can do too much about what is happening on the streets, but there may be a few things. And then, of course, some of the other issues. We have lots to talk about, and we certainly encourage you to visit the website. You can find out both about David Georgatos as well as Nick Pitts, and we have some information about both of those ministries that you need to follow and get some of their resources. And as you go there, don't forget, we have our Pray, Organize, and Vote. That's a one-stop opportunity for you to get some election resources. We encourage you to pray, to organize, to make sure that not only you are registered to vote, but others, and then finally that they will vote intelligently. And we have some great resources we've posted on the website today. So click on that banner. We'll come back with more right after this.
They call this the information age. It used to be news was hard to come by and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America, is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Looking at the debate last night, and if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Debbie Georgatos with us, as well as Nick Pitts. And let's head out to first the state of Michigan. Might be one of those very important states in terms of the presidential election. And Susie, thank you for joining us today.
Hello. Would you like to hear my ideas on abortion or upon Donald Trump and your tax dollars at work?
Any of those would work for me.
All right. Donald Trump never said. Hillary Rodham Clinton put this right out there in television where Donald Trump said, who cares? So what? It doesn't bother me. What does it matter? What difference does it make? Where our money, our missiles, our nuclear warheads and weapons go? It doesn't bother me. That is an outrageous, bold-faced lie coming right out of Hillary Rodham Clinton's mouth. If you would have seen the presidential National Republican Convention, he said, do you think for 1 minute that we would send our money, our hard-earned taxes, our hard-earned money, our missiles, our nuclear warheads, and our weapons, would we let that fall into our enemies' hands? He said, not for 1 minute. He said, do you think I would send millions and billions of dollars of aid to our enemies? He said, not for 1 minute. This is how much, this is Hillary Rodham Clinton and Barack Obama and his administration, how much he is sending to Bangladesh out of our hard-earned taxes, $200 million. To Egypt, he sent $1.6 billion. To Libya, he gave them $2.5 million. To Sudan, he gave them $31 million. Tunisia, $25 million. Yemen, support $62 million. And that is horrific. That's terrible. These people, Iran is an enemy of our nation. She doesn't like us. And look at the failed attempt they had with the nuclear conference there. That was with Barack Obama, and that fell on Hillary Rodham Clinton and Barack Obama's back. Nobody else, theirs. No. Where they had a failed nuclear conference. 8 of our American citizens in an embassy. And for her to say, who cares? So what? What does it matter? That's 8 men, that's 8 people's lives she could have saved by picking up the phone and say, hey, those are our citizens, yeah. Bring them back. Yeah. We want them here brought back to us safe and sound and happy, healthy, well and alive, and not in a body bag. She refused to do anything. The second one was Benghazi embassy. 5 people lost their lives there, American citizens. They weren't just killed, they were brutally annihilated. Both times she refused to pick up her phone and say, hey, these are American citizens. You bring them back home to us safe and sound and happy, healthy, well and alive, or you're not getting anything from us. What happened in that failed attempt is our Barack Obama administration, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Secretary of State.
All right. Let me give everybody a chance around the table to do that. And give me some of those facts and figures maybe in an email, because I've always heard 4, and you can mention 8 and 5, and so that'd be helpful to even have some of that in the future. But Debbie, that is just something that never came up. I just am amazed that we talked about keeping America secure, and the words Benghazi and Libya and some of that never came up. Iran came up once, in terms of the Iranian nuclear deal, but that's about it.
Yeah, that last night's debate was supposed to be focused on America's prosperity, direction, and security. I don't know, because I think the moderator lost control of the debate very early on.
Yeah, prosperity went on and on and on. I wouldn't have started with that anyway, but he did.
Yeah, and I don't know whether he intended, maybe had questions down the line that he never got to about Benghazi. We'll never know. But he didn't get to some really important issues that relate to America's security. And one particular point on Iran and security was, I was just astonished that Hillary Clinton brought up repeatedly the Iranian deal as an example of the beauty and wonder of their diplomacy, as though the Iranian deal has been resoundingly denounced by dozens of military experts, Middle Eastern experts, who all tell you we pretty much gave them everything they wanted, including the money you alluded to, Susie. We sent a lot of money to Iran. This is the largest terrorist exporting country in the world. They fund terrorists around the world, and we sent them more and more money in connection with this deal. And this should be something you're almost embarrassed and hope doesn't come up. But she brought it up and was bragging about it. And again, a lost opportunity for Donald Trump. I think he said a little bit about it, but he didn't say enough. He didn't have specifics ready.
Yeah. And you got to recognize that when they're talking here, there are a lot of people that are going to vote for Hillary Clinton no matter what she says, or a lot of people are going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what he says. So they really are reaching maybe just a few million people. Some people feel it may only be a few 100,000 in some of these swing states. And those are people that probably by definition are not well educated on the issues, the low information voters, as some people have called them. And so you really have to spell that out. So when Hillary Clinton brags about the Iranian nuclear deal, you need to come back and say, there are a lot of people that are not bragging about it, even people that support you, Hillary Clinton, who I've had on this program, individuals that are very liberal sometimes, that I would not have on for other reasons, but come on to explain why this nuclear deal is such a bad idea. And so you've got to explain that.
It's really fascinating. Again, just to continue, like her touting of the Iran deal, and you talk about those low information voters, that the low information, the lowest common denominator would know that America has a very special relationship with Israel. And then to connect the dots, Iran has been very much founded upon the idea of being able to push Israel into the sea, and to see how contradicting that could be to our relationship. But what was noticeably absent also is, the Benghazi emails weren't talked about, but for a religious voter, evangelical voters, there was no reference to religious liberty. There was no reference to abortion. There was just noticeable absence. It was a very strange debate.
Yeah, Susie was going to ask about that too. Nothing about abortion, nothing about religious liberty. Marriage probably wouldn't come up, but certainly some of those others could have. And there is, again, a striking difference. When you see the vice presidential debate, recognize that Mike Pence was the first person, long before it was fashionable, to call for the defunding of Planned Parenthood. Tim Kaine, who is the vice presidential nominee for Hillary Clinton, gets a 100% rating from Planned Parenthood. Those are as strikingly different. And if they don't ask questions like that for the vice presidential candidates, then we really know the fix is in.
Yeah, I think that Governor Pence is, I know Donald Trump has been in media a long time or had media attention, but at this level it's new. Governor Pence has been through a governorship and his service in Washington, so I think he's going to be ready. I think he will get in. He'll have a short list of things I'm going to get in no matter what, and that's probably going to be on the list it's Planned Parenthood and it's defense of life and defense of marriage. I think at some point he'll fit those in.
We certainly hope so. Let's take another phone call real quickly, and certainly a lot of you want to address the issue today, so we'll head to Louisiana, KPAE. And Ricky, what would you like to add to our conversation?
Kerby, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and Donald Trump would win by a landslide victory. All he has to do is portray Hillary for what she is, a corrupt socialist. We could even leave out the corrupt socialist, just a socialist, because when she was running against Bernie, they both try to outdo each other. Who was the biggest socialist? We'll just have a picture of the starving kids in Venezuela hospitals. That's Bernie and Hillary's utopia is Venezuela. It's a socialist country, and the little kids have starved to death in hospitals. Just put that on the commercial, and that's what Hillary stands for. As far as the Iran thing, the reason why Obama bought land in Hawaii at the same time, or right around the same time, when he gave $133 billion to Iran to build the nuclear bomb so they could blow us up, that's the obvious reason. Kohimi, give me 30 days' notice before you nuke us so I can get out of United States.
Yeah, let's hope that's not why he landed in Hawaii. By the way, I do not think that he's going to move to Hawaii. If I can say something about Barack Obama, I am convinced that he's going to stay around Washington, D.C., and he's going to just keep, doing just the opposite of what George W. Bush did. Did you see that picture the other day of Michelle Obama hugging George W. Bush? And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because you have vilified George Bush, and George Bush has hardly ever responded in kind. I just don't think that's going to be the way in which Barack Obama is going to react when he is sent packing. I think he's not even going to get on the helicopter. He's going to say, I'm just going to get into a condo down the street, because every time this president, whoever it is, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, does something I don't like, I'm going to be out there asking for a press conference. I just know he's going to be involved for many, many years.
And sadly, the media will let him have a press conference, even as a private citizen, Barack Obama. He'll be able to get more attention that a lot of elected members in the House and the Senate can get from the media.
We need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll take some more phone calls. If you would like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. And I'll also play another clip that had to do with trade and NAFTA. And also Hillary saying that Donald lives in his own reality. So we'll see how that plays out, and you get a chance to hear some of those comments. And then we'll keep taking your phone calls. One of you wants to talk a little bit more about, I noticed, Donald Trump sniffling. That did actually begin to show up on the various Twitter feeds. Many people thought we would have a coughing fit, but instead we had a sniffing one, and I've got a few people here that want to talk about that issue as well. But if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Don't forget, we have our Pray, Organize, and Vote material. And again, one of the other action items we've given for you is the issue of, at the end of this week, the United States gives up control of the internet. And interestingly enough, Jim DeMint, former senator from South Carolina, now the head of the Heritage Foundation, says it's now or never to save the internet. So if you have not taken action, we have an action item there to stop the Obama administration from giving up control of the internet. So we have a lot of that on the website, and we encourage you to educate yourself and take some action. We'll be back with more right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Constitution of the United States is becoming a forgotten document. We memorize the preamble and we learn about the Bill of Rights in grade school, but then we tend to forget it. You probably recall that the First Amendment protects against Congress making any law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. But some of the most beautiful protections for religious liberty are found in the constitutions of each state. Arkansas starts by saying, all men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences. Colorado explains that the free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination shall forever hereafter be guaranteed. Many state constitutions explain some of the obvious limits of religious liberty, like Florida. Religious freedom shall not justify practices inconsistent with public morals, peace, or safety. Some, like Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Maine, are short. Others, like Massachusetts and Missouri, go on for paragraphs. Few are as poetic as Virginia. That religion or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence, and therefore all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience, and that it is the mutual duty of all to practice Christian forbearance, love, and charity towards each other. Whether short and sweet, long and elegant, it is reassuring to know that every state government has been founded upon the protection of religious liberty for every citizen in every state. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Debbie Georgatos with us and Nick Pitts. Let's, if we can, go to Hillary Clinton talking about this. And, of course, there was a back and forth about NAFTA and trade. And then, of course, Hillary got in a zinger that Donald lives in his own reality. Here's some of the comments.
Let's not assume that trade is the only challenge we have in the economy. I think it is a part of it, and I've said what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a special prosecutor. We're going to enforce the trade deals we have, and we're going to hold people accountable. When I was Secretary of State, we actually increased American exports globally 30%. We increased them to China 50%. So I know how to really work to get new jobs and to get exports that help to create more new jobs.
Well, you haven't done it in 30 years or 26 years.
Well,
any number you
I've
want to
been
do.
a senator.
You
Donald,
haven't done it.
And
You haven't
I
done
have
it.
been a
And
Secretary of State, and I have
Your
done
husband signed
a lot.
NAFTA, which was one of the worst things that ever happened to the
that's your
manufacturing
opinion.
industry.
That is your
You go to New England, you go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, you go anywhere you want, Secretary Clinton, and you will see devastation where manufacturing is down 30, 40, sometimes 50%. NAFTA is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country. And now you want to approve Trans-Pacific Partnership. You were totally in favor of it. Then you heard what I was saying, how bad it is, and you said, I can't win that debate. But you know that if you did win, you would approve that, and that will be almost as bad as NAFTA. Nothing will ever top NAFTA.
That is just not accurate. I was against it once it was finally negotiated and the terms were laid out. I wrote about that in...
You called it the gold standard.
I hope...
You called it the gold standard of trade deals. You said it's the finest deal you've ever seen.
No.
And then you heard what I said about it, and all of a sudden you were against it.
Well, Donald, I know you live in your own reality, but that is not the facts. The facts are, I did say I hoped it would be a good deal, but when it was negotiated, which I was not responsible for, I concluded it wasn't. I wrote about that.
So is it President Obama's fault? Is it President Obama's fault?
Even announced. Look, there
Secretary, is it President Obama's fault?
There are
because he's pushing it.
There are different views about what's good for our country, our economy, and our leadership in the world. And I think it's important to look at what we need to do to get the economy going again. That's why I said new jobs with rising incomes, investments, not in more tax cuts that would add $5 trillion to the debt.
But you have no plan.
Oh, I do.
Secretary,
in fact,
you have no plan.
A book about it. It's called Stronger Together. You can pick it up tomorrow.
That's about all.
Well, go read the book, I guess, is the answer to that one. But you were talking about here, they're talking about NAFTA. Then they talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We've talked about this on the program as well. These trade deals are not good deals. And I think anybody that thinks that they are can't just live in this world. Well, there are different views on that. No, either there is a good view or a bad view. There is a good economic policy or a bad economic policy. And in some of these cases, it would be good to do that kind of fact checking, don't you think?
Absolutely. You know, on the trade deals, generically speaking, I feel like just as though we should support free enterprise and free markets domestically, we should support free trade as a concept internationally. What's happened over the years is that we have negotiated deals that really we don't hold America's interests at first. The deals become unfair to us. They have China with trade, with currency manipulation, all sorts of reasons the deals don't end up being fair to us. But I think Donald Trump is off track when he talks about imposing tariffs, for example, to force businesses to come home, to interfere with free trade. I think that genuine free trade is a healthy thing, and it should basically be a free market conservative person's view. We need to fix NAFTA and fix the TPP and maybe just pull those back and start all over. But I'm a little concerned about him being so anti-free trade as though trade's a bad thing, because you just can't function in the world that way. And actually, as many people have pointed out, if you do the big tariff thing, you run the risk of actually causing a problem, as it did years ago with Smoot-Hawley, which people sometimes think contributed to the Depression.
The Great Depression.
Yeah, in an increasingly globalized world, it's going to require us not to have a silver bullet when it comes to trade, but just really be able to be flexible, but also to see the value that comes from the variety of different products that each country offers. And,
I think Donald Trump could say, look, if you like the way the economy is going right now, and if you like what Barack Obama is doing right now, then 4 more years or 8 more years of Clinton are going to be that and worse. If you think we need to change and you don't think that we're doing such a good job right now, then I'm your guy, because I'm going to renegotiate some of these terrible deals that I would never have negotiated for my own company.
Yeah, that was I did a bunch of media this morning. My big answer is, what I think conservatives should say is, whether you think Hillary was more polished yesterday in the debate and Trump was more Trump-esque, at the end of the day, 2/3 of America say the country is on the wrong track, and Hillary is essentially running on, let me keep you right on this track. I'm Obama on steroids. Nothing about what Obama is doing is she willing to condemn. So you're kind of saying she's going to do exactly the same as he did, and most people don't want that.
Yeah. Let's see if we can. One of our callers wants to talk about the Supreme Court. Didn't hear much about that last night, did we? So, Melinda in Texas, KBJS, you have the floor. What about that?
Yes, hi. Well, we were kind of curious about, Obama campaigning with Hillary Clinton, he's through running for office. So we're kind of thinking that he's doing this because he has to, because we're thinking that that's someone he's probably going to get appointed as a Supreme Court justice through Hillary Clinton. And I think that's something that Trump should bring up, because that would really get everybody's attention.
Yeah, well, whether or not she appoints Barack Obama to the Supreme Court, he may or may not be interested in that. We could certainly say the difference between the kind of people that Hillary Clinton would put on the Supreme Court and the 11 that are on that list that Donald Trump have. You're a lawyer. Debbie, talk about that for just a minute, because I see a stark difference between what the court looks like as Hillary Clinton appoints anywhere from 1 to 4 justices and what happens if Donald Trump is the president.
It is one of the most important distinctions between these two candidates. And, the Supreme Court, people comment Justice Scalia unexpectedly passed away this year. And he is pointed to by the left as a really just a far right judge. And the truth is, Anton Scalia is exactly what a justice is supposed to be, meaning he interprets the Constitution and he follows the Constitution as it is written. So, for example, he had to agree that burning a flag constituted protected free speech, even though he personally finds that offensive. That's the mark of an actual constitutional scholar serving on the court. What we've seen through liberal appointees on the court, liberal justices, is just policy making with respect to marriage, abortion, all sorts of vitally important issues. So to get the court back to his limited role of interpreting the Constitution is vital. And Donald Trump may not comprehend all those constitutional principles, but he knows that conservatives expect him to do that. And so I think he will stick with the list he produced, which were all great choices. And Hillary is openly a non-constitutionalist. She is happy to have the court rule in cases and expand beyond their role in terms of actually interpreting the Constitution.
If nothing else, to say that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 83, Anthony Kennedy is 80, Stephen Breyer is 78. And that's why I said it's not just the one particular open seat. It could be 4 open seats in the next 4 years, which would just change everything, wouldn't it, Nick?
Decades of impact.
I think by Trump opening up and broadcasting that list of 11 justices, I think that is just one pointer that could just really unleash a level of support that he just hasn't experienced yet, by showing who he's going to surround himself with, who he's going to associate himself with. The Never Trump movement still continues to simmer, and if he were to continue to just surround himself and make known the individuals that he would be around, I think would be significant.
These are the people who will be in my cabinet. These are the people who will be in the Supreme Court. Let's take a break. When we come back in the second hour, we'll continue our conversation. Again, we have our Pray, Organize, and Vote election resources. And as I mentioned yesterday, we announced that we will be having an Alaska cruise. And Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, myself will all be part of that to Alaska. And so if you would like to know more about that, we have that on the website along with our Take Action. It is now or never to save the internet. And if you haven't taken action on that item, we have that on the website as well. We have a lot more to cover, and we will do that right after these important messages.
This election has been one of the most divisive in history. Even close friends have been driven apart because they dared support the wrong candidate. Disciples by how they love each other. I'm asking you to do something today as a sign of unity. Step up and support the Truth Team at Point of View Radio so we can be a beacon of Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. Visit pointofview.net. Make a difference by giving as generously as you can, or call us 800-347-5151. Our next president will likely appoint at least 2 Supreme Court justices, maybe even more. We need each other. And I believe that we need Point of View, and Point of View needs you to invest in the mission. Please join us today, pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith. Don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join us, we have an opportunity to continue looking at the presidential debate that took place last night. If you just joined us, we, in the first hour, spent a little bit of time hearing a few of the clips from Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. But Bill Clinton showed up because we were talking about NAFTA. That's why I happened to look at NAFTA there, and that's why I slipped into that. And so, interesting enough, he showed up in the debate in that sense because they talked about your husband signed NAFTA, which was a terrible trade agreement. This hour, we're going to look at the issue of law and order, some of the other challenges that Hillary Clinton brought against Donald Trump. And of course, we have lots of opportunity to kind of get comments and questions from some of you. So if you have not been able to get through the line, let me now give you that opportunity. 1-800-351-1212. Around the round table, Debbie Georgatos and Nick Pitts. And I mentioned just as we were going to the break something that's worth a little more mention, Debbie, and that is interestingly enough, Jim DeMint has been saying the same things we've been saying here for a couple of weeks. It's now or never to save the internet. And anybody that has actually gone to our website, we know we have this take action item: stop the Obama administration from giving up control of the internet. And we know that by the end of this week, that will be September 30th, it will transfer over. And by Saturday, October 1st, it will no longer be covered by the same mechanism and regulations that it was before. Now, there have been some that have simply said, it's not a big deal. And you and I have even talked about the fact that a lot of conservatives haven't made a big deal about it. And I will be the first to admit that come Saturday, we'll all click on our internet and it'll be the same. And maybe even a year from now, it'll be the same. But somewhere along the line, you're starting to see countries like Russia and China and others that have been notorious for blocking certain kind of internet content. I think somewhere along the line, you're going to see that this was a really bad decision. And I think it's incumbent upon the Congress right now, especially the Republican leaders, to say, wait a minute, this is something we need to postpone, to really thoroughly discuss before we the same values about free speech.
I couldn't agree more. It is to even be open to the idea of letting, and the assumed or the presumed entity to take the place of the United States in the control of this ICANN, is the United Nations. And they have been speaking openly about wanting to be the one to replace the United States' role in overseeing ICANN, which is the entity that assigns not just names and numbers, but it controls whether you can get a website or not. And so the entity presumed to be responsible is, who wants is United Nations. And they mentioned, Kerby, you mentioned those countries and others that are very repressive of free speech. It seems like it reflects a failure to understand how deeply the First Amendment and the valuing of freedom of speech and freedom of religion is interwoven in American society. We are the standard bearer in the world for free speech, free association, free religion, all of these things that are just in our core. And America should be the country controlling the internet. And this is not appreciated, sadly, apparently by Barack Obama. I will say there's a bill pending. I know what Ted Cruz is trying to do about it. Senator Cruz from Texas is trying to have a bill that essentially says that the control of the internet may not be passed along by the president to any other entity without an affirmative, it's either majority or 2/3 vote by Congress. He's trying to make it so that Congress retains control of that issue. But I don't know if he can get that passed before Friday.
I don't know either.
Yeah, so I would just continue to echo that. I mean, in the founding of our country, the seeds of liberty were sown into the soil, and today we reap a harvest of diversity. And partially why we see that is just because of the diversity of voices that continue to be heard from the left, the right, the center, and then the extremes on both ends. Part of what makes America great is the ability to be able to express ourselves, right? So what George Washington said, take away the free speech and we're like lambs led to slaughter. And so that's part of what makes America great.
I got chills when you said that. That's right.
It is good. Nick, we've seen some examples of censorship taking place in the past?
Yeah, I mean, you can look no further than Apple, right? That's sitting right here in front of me.
There you go.
My iPhone. And then I can look into the App Store, and the Manhattan Declaration hasn't been able yet to be able to get an app approved simply because of their stance on traditional marriage.
Yeah. It's first abortion, marriage, but marriage is the deal. And you go to China, type in, and when you're in China next time, those of you who go there, Tibet, nothing shows up. Type in freedom. Nothing shows up. You go to Myanmar, whole areas are closed off. You cannot even buy, for example, certain kinds of World War II memorabilia in France, because if it's World War II memorabilia that has a Nazi symbol on it, you can't buy that on the internet. Again, these are just small illustrations of what could happen when individuals who do not share our value of free speech control the internet.
I was going to add, and I love both the points that both of you are making. This whole concept of freedom of speech, it is inherent in human nature. It's what people want to be able to do, and it is repressed around the world. And so one way that people who want to repress speech succeed in doing that, convincing people, they label certain speech hatred. So instead of saying, I don't want to hear your view on traditional marriage, they say, oh, you're a hater. You're intolerant. And this, not just the issue of marriage, but all sorts of issues arising out of radical Islam, arising out of just also, you can find many places where traditional thought, traditional free speech is repressed in the name of stopping hatred, silencing hatred. I mean, it's just a complete turning on its head of the logic, but that's the kind of logic that these repressive countries who are members of the UN impose in their own countries.
I mean, we even saw that last night, right? I don't know if you all saw the tweets from Hofstra University. So obviously on the campus setting, there's so much that's being said about microaggressions and trigger warnings. And there was even a sign for a trigger warning going into the debate last night. Someone tweeted that out. And so, I mean, we're just in a very interesting time. And so during these interesting times, it's going to be all the more important that we protect our right to be able to speak out. I would think
so. We're going to come back in just a few minutes and take some more of your phone calls and just give you an overview of some things we'll talk about. I noticed one of our callers wants to talk about the Trump tax returns or Hillary's emails. We have that clip that we'll play in just a minute. We'll get into this issue of law and order. That's been a big issue. And again, I have some questions about how much can a president do in that regard. But certainly bringing the nation together, the bully pulpit might be helpful, and whether or not you want to federalize the police force, that's a very important issue. And then, so as we talk about some of the emails, again, one of the issues that has surfaced quite a bit is this issue of emails. And the most recent Rasmussen poll shows that a lot of people do care about the emails. You might remember Bernie Sanders, I don't care about those blank emails. And a lot of people go, okay, I guess nobody does. And the surveys show just the opposite. And we'll get into some of those topics as well. So if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of those issues in just a minute. As I mentioned before, there are a number of people that are still saying it's an important issue for you to let your member of Congress know and your two senators know how you feel on this transferring the control of the internet. And so that is an action item that we have posted here today. I also have a commentary today on the new LGBT rules, which will also come into effect in Massachusetts on Saturday, October 1st. And these rules now, because they have defined public accommodations, will affect churches and Christian organizations. Of course, we've seen a little bit of what's happened at Gordon College and some of the other places that I've written about. So that commentary is available to you. And then the video we have is, Are You Registered? Right now, we're encouraging you to make sure that everybody you know is registered, because you know what? 14% of Americans who think they're registered are not, 1 in 7. So that's why we have the video, and we have a link so that you can make sure you're registered, other people are registered, and show them where to go and get registered. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
In just a few days, the nation's strictest LGBT non-discrimination laws will go into effect in Massachusetts. According to the latest pronouncements from the state government, even churches and Christian schools will be affected since they are defined as public accommodations. Any accommodation must allow patrons to use men or women's restrooms as well as locker rooms and changing rooms that are consistent with their gender identity. Moreover, it requires that these venues must also use names, pronouns, and gender-related terms appropriate to employees' stated gender identity in communications with the employee and with others. As Christians, we believe that sex and gender are essentially the same thing, but the Massachusetts law instead defines gender identity as a person's gender-related identity, appearance, or behavior, whether or not that gender-related identity, appearance, or behavior is different from that traditionally associated with a person's physiology or assigned sex at birth. It doesn't take much imagination to see where conflicts will arise between this latest transgender law and Christian teaching and church programs. Most churches hold events that are considered to be open to the public. Churches will probably welcome people of any sexual orientation, but they will probably balk at opening up their locker rooms or bathroom facilities for transgendered people. They might find it difficult to use pronouns that are not consistent with biology. And if pastors and teachers in Massachusetts churches teach on various biblical passages, a transgender person could take the church to court over the content of the sermon or Sunday school lesson. Massachusetts was the first state to grant same-sex marriages. It now might be the first state with a lawsuit against a church over transgender issues, and that case might make it all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Debbie Georgatos and Nick Pitts with us. Let's go to Florida. Bailey, thank you for joining us today. What's your thought?
Oh, hey, thanks so much for having me on. I just wanted to call because I have been so frustrated today after the debate last night with, there were several occasions, in my opinion, that Donald Trump did not capitalize on things Hillary Clinton was saying, and in particular, when she was describing the reasons why he may not be releasing his tax returns, she mentioned that he would potentially be hiding something. And I feel like he should have said right then, well, look who's talking. I mean, she will not show us her 33,000 emails.
Yeah. Looks who's hiding,
and
yeah. Good line.
Like,
yeah.
Like, well, I mean, it seems to me like she was describing herself. And then, I mean, I could go on and on, but the other example would be when she was saying that he speaks terribly to women, calling them names. I believe there's many records of Hillary Clinton calling women names that her husband has had affairs with and being very derogatory towards them. So it just is frustrating as a young voter to not hear him stand up for himself and say, well, you know, you're accusing me of something that is not true when in fact you are the one.
Yeah.
That
we no longer have shame. You know, one of the ones that Nick mentioned is, you know, Brian Williams doing fact checking. You know, we sometimes talk about the Brian Williams press. You know, and oh, look at the derogatory things that Donald Trump has said to these women compared to what your own husband, Bill Clinton, has done to these women, and on and on and on. I mean, it just is amazing. Debbie?
Yeah, on a similar vein, I think that's a great point, Bailey. And on a similar vein, I thought it was so interesting. Prior to the debate And actually, during the debate, Hillary Clinton kept agitating for fact-checking and saying, we need fact-checking. I'm thinking, this is a woman who claims she landed in Bosnia in 1996 under sniper fire, complete fabrication. This is a woman who said to the parents, the grieving parents, as their sons' bodies are being returned from Benghazi, don't worry, we'll get the guy who made that video, and she knew the video had nothing to do with it. This is a woman who said, even after the FBI head testified in Congress about all the lies that she gave in relation to her email scandal, she said after that in a press conference like 2 days later, I never sent nor received classified information over my email. I mean, the woman should not be asking for fact checking. She better watch out what she asks for, because, I mean, she wouldn't know the truth of it, bitter in the nose. I mean, it's just an astonishing audacity.
Yeah, I think Trump, though, to a certain extent, he missed the opportunity, but he did gain it back when he did the quid pro quo deal. The art of the deal, he came back and said, you show us through your emails, and I'll release my tax returns. And so I think he really hit it on the dot there. But it really does. I just think that, Bailey, I'm with you. I'm a millennial voter, and I think it's just so interesting, the outcry for transparency and authenticity, especially from these 74 million millennial voters, that we really want someone that's authentic and transparent. And what we're seeing is just we have two candidates that just are leaving much to be lurking behind the shadows.
Let's hear exactly what was said, just so in case you weren't there or maybe tuned it out by that time. Here's what they said.
I don't mind releasing. I'm under a routine audit, and it'll be released. And as soon as the audit's finished, it'll be released. But you will learn more about Donald Trump by going down to the federal elections, where I filed a 104-page, essentially financial statement of sorts, the forms that they have. It shows income. In fact, the income, I just looked today, the income is filed at $694 million for this past year. $694 million. If you would have told me I was going to make that 15 or 20 years ago, I would have been very surprised. But that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. When we have a country that's doing so badly, that's being ripped off by every single country in the world, it's the kind of thinking that our country needs, because everybody, Lester, we have a trade deficit with all of the countries that we do business with of almost $800 billion a year. You know what that is? That means who's negotiating these trade deals? We have people that are political hacks negotiating our trade deals.
The IRS has an audit of your taxes. You're perfectly free to release your taxes during an audit. And so the question, does the public's right to know outweigh your personal?
Well, I told you, I will release them as soon as the audit. Look, I've been under audit almost for 15 years. I know a lot of wealthy people that have never been audited. I said, you get audited? I get audited almost every year. And in a way, I should be complaining. I'm not even complaining. I don't mind it. It's almost become a way of life. I get audited by the IRS, but other people don't. I will say this. We have a situation in this country that has to be taken care of. I will release my tax returns against my lawyer's wishes when she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted. As soon as she releases them, I will release my tax returns.
They were not supposed to applaud, but they did for him. And then, of course, Lester Holt said you're not supposed to. And then a couple of times when they applauded for Hillary, he never turned around and told them not to. But nevertheless, that's the way the game gets played. And that, if nothing else, is one of the better lines. You know, I'll release my tax returns when she releases her 33,000 emails. Is that a good line?
I love the line, and actually it was a little bit of a training device that Donald Trump used for Hillary, because now she's aware every time she raises it, he can go right back to, okay, as I said, you release your emails, I'll release my tax returns. But on a more serious note, it is very common for people, elected officials and candidates running for president to release their tax returns. I just think he should as a matter of ethics. I mean, I just think he should.
I know what'll happen, and we saw that with Mitt Romney. All you have to do is dig all the way down and find one thing that doesn't work, or, you know, some investment that is questionable, and then they make that the news story of the day. So I understand why he's, you know,
I agree.
With the amount of reach he has, you can probably find probably 36 different investments over the years that people will go, I can't believe he invested in that.
Or charities that they...
Yeah, or charities they didn't give, whatever.
And, you know, that might be 36 days that he's going to have to deal with those stories, but I can't tell you how many months we continue to talk about this. And I think it's just time to get it past
away.
it.
Yeah, put that
it.
over and make that, because those are just kind of the kind of things that... just dog a campaign. Mm-hmm. And again, I wish the email issue would dog Hillary Clinton. But
you're saying it is a little bit. I mean, yeah, more than people thought.
Let's, if we can, real quickly, since we'll go to number 6 here real quickly. This is how she responded to the issue of emails.
He also raised the issue of your emails. Do you want to respond to that?
I do. I made a mistake using a private email.
That's for sure.
And if I had to do it over again, I would obviously do it differently. But I'm not going to make any excuses. It was a mistake, and I take responsibility for that.
Mr. Trump?
That was more than a mistake. That was done purposely. Okay, that was not a mistake. That was done purposely. When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth, so they're not prosecuted. When you have the man that set up the illegal server taking the Fifth, I think it's disgraceful. And believe me, this country thinks it's disgraceful. It really thinks it's disgraceful also.
So again, just a few more of the comments there. And let's take one more phone call before we take a break. And we'll go to Eddie in Georgia. Eddie, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. My heart just breaks that she can make accusations and accuse Donald Trump of being a racist. And I mean, it just disturbs me to the utmost because when they had the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, and they went around the country and raised all these hundreds of millions of dollars for the Haitians, for the humanitarian aid. And it was the Clinton Foundation that ran away with all those hundreds of millions of dollars. Not 5% of that money went to the Haitian people or the Haitian government or to even rebuilding Haiti. And then when the Haitians started complaining about it, Bill Clinton went and apologized to the Haitian people for destroying their agriculture on the island of Haiti when he was president of the United States. And these are the same people. Last night she was talking about mandatory minimums. And I remember when her husband was president of the United States, she was the one talking about Donald Trump being a racist. She was the one that was advocating that all of these thugs and gangbangers and all of them need to be locked away. Then finally the president, Bill Clinton, instituted Street Strikes You Out. And every time you turn around now with kids and grandkids of all these blacks across the country, say, yeah, my son got 25 to life and all of this. And what I'm saying is that she was talking about going to reform the criminal justice system when she was the worst advocate for it, for all the corruption that's in the system. I mean, my heart bleeds for her to call him a racist when we know the kind of things that they have done. And I know Donald Trump, I saw on the internet where he was down in Miami and Little Haiti, and they was telling him about all this. And I think that black folks need to know because they say they need 20% of the black vote for him to win. We what's wrong with a campaign to say, hey, you return those hundreds of millions of dollars to the Haitian people, then you would be worthy of the black vote. And I believe these black folks that's giving their votes away to Hillary.
Sure.
And they need to
take
know
a break
this.
now.
Yeah.
I need to take a break, but, again, some of the things you've talked about in the first part are out of the book Clinton Cash, and Peter Schweitzer's been on the program many times before. And I'll tell you what, on the second half of this hour, we're going to spend some time talking about this issue of law and order, criminal justice. We'll play one of the clips from Donald Trump, and we'll get the counterpoint between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. That's coming up right after these important messages. Stay tuned.
They call this the information age. It used to be news was hard to come by and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America, is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Going to talk a little bit about race relations and law and order and all of that. But before we do, I thought it would be good for you for just a few minutes to know a little bit more about the two guests around the round table. They are both individuals that have been on the program before, but it still is worthwhile mentioning that now you've changed the website to America Can We Talk. So if you click on the picture there of Debbie Georgatos, you will see that that will take you to America Can We Talk. I know that some of you in the listening audience have a chance to hear her radio program on the radio, but anybody can hear it online, and that is a great resource. And as people go to that website, Debbie, they can find out about you speaking for them, the radio program, and of course the book, Ladies Can We Talk. So what are available to some of our listeners if they go to that website?
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. At the website, americacanwetalk.org, in the top left is Listen Live. So on the actual show time, which is Sunday evenings, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time, is live. But we just started this past week live streaming the show. So if you're just sitting at your desk on Sunday evening, you can, if you're on Facebook, go to the America Can We Talk Facebook page. Right. You can watch the show. It's a kind of fun, and you can comment. And people were commenting. We tried this just this first time a couple of days ago. And on the website, we try to capture the interviews. We have one or two guests each week. We have great interviews. This past week we had Alan West, and we had Daniel Horowitz, who's a brilliant writer with a conservative review, constitutional, just brilliant guy. So you can go to old interviews, all the old interviews, old podcasts, and we put up commentary. I do some video commentary, 3 points in 3 minutes, or statements on certain issues. So, and our Facebook feed is right up on the website, so you can kind of see it there too. And you were basically just trying to comment on all the issues facing America from the perspective of we need to hold on to the precious, unique identity of America as established in the founding, and we need to hold on to liberty and all the freedoms we have, because every generation has that obligation. And right now, it's our job to hold on to America's liberty.
Again, America Can We Talk? We have the link, and all you have to do is find Debbie's picture and take that there. And Nick, I might just mention that, again, we also have the link to the Denison Forum on Truth and Culture. It's denisonforum.org. And as people go there, they will find all sorts of things about, of course, Dr. Jim Denison and you and others that are writing on that. Today, we posted one of the pieces that Jim Denison put out. What would God say about last night's debate? And always so articulate. He's one of the smartest guys I know. And he actually talks faster than I do and thinks faster than I do. So it's always a challenge when I have him in studio. But 2 points. First of all, God would be grieved by the divisiveness of our culture, which is what we're going to talk about in just a minute. And number two, he wants us to serve his children. And then at the very bottom, it even mentions that you'll be on the program here today and that you were on WBAP this morning. So this is a way in which people can receive this every single day. And there are some things that are just must read. One of those, of course, is Gary Bauer. Every day has the end of day report. Another one is some of the material that comes from Family Research Council. And, of course, the Breakpoint commentary, but right up there. And sometimes the first one I read every day comes from Jim Denison. And, again, this is a resource that's available for our listeners. So tell us what we would find when we land on the website there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, Kerby, and thank you so much for your readership. We greatly appreciate it. So I couldn't agree more about Jim Denison. I think he's forgotten more than I'll know. And so he's our principal. And so he is the hamburger that has bacon and just cheese, and I'm kind of the tofu burger that's gluten-free. And so obviously our first primary product is what's called the cultural commentary, which takes an issue of the day and tries to engage it in a thoughtful manner from a biblical perspective. And then we just recently released a new product called the Daily Briefing. And the Daily Briefing is just a survey of today's news with biblical perspective. So everything from the debate last night to the Marines are considering changing the slogan to all sorts of varieties of information, just to figure out what is a biblical way to think through some of these issues. What I like to call is the skim. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. The skim is just a survey of today's news, and that's our Christian version of the skim. Skim. Just grateful for the opportunity and love what I get to do.
You know, Debbie, the way Jim Denison used to do it is he would get up sometimes like in the middle of the night, it seemed like, and see what was in the news and write about it that morning, and it would land in my inbox before I got out of bed. And I thought, this man is made of something I do not understand. Now I understand he writes it the day before. But can you imagine getting up if you were to do a morning show or you were to do a morning commentary as early as he was getting up to do that, and to have it always so succinct? I'm not sure, without some good editing, anything I write before 9 o'clock probably be worth reading. And that just shows you what an incredible individual Jim Denison is.
And such dedication. such dedication to take those ideas, to spend the time it takes every single day to get those ideas out there. Because you can think them and you can think them in your car driving home, but taking the time to write it out and share it is just love of America and love of the Bible, love of Christianity, love
Again,
of God.
DenisonForum.org, and I would encourage everyone, if they can, to sign up to get some of the great material that is available, and it shows up in your inbox every day. If you'd like to get a sample, we have it on the website right now. What Would God Say About Last Night's Debate? Well written and some great material. And part of the point is the divisiveness of the culture. So let's talk about this. Here's what Donald Trump said last night about this issue of law and order, stop and frisk. And, of course, Hillary Clinton had some things to say about it as well.
We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York, it brought the crime rate way down. But you take the gun away from criminals that shouldn't be having it. We have gangs roaming the street, and in many cases, they're illegally here, illegal immigrants, and they have guns, and they shoot people. And we have to be very strong, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to know what we're doing. Right now, our police, in many cases, are afraid to do anything. We have to protect our inner cities because African American communities are being decimated by crime.
Your 2 minutes has expired, but I do want to follow up. Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in New York because it largely singled out Black and Hispanic young men.
No, you're wrong. It went before a judge who was a very against police judge. It was taken away from her, and our new mayor, refused to go forward with the case. They would have won an appeal. If you look at it throughout the country, there are many places where
the argument is that it's a form of racial profiling.
No, the argument is that we have to take the guns away from these people that have them and that are bad people that shouldn't have them. These are felons. These are people that are bad people that shouldn't be. When you have 3,000 shootings in Chicago from January 1st, when you have 4,000 people killed in Chicago by guns from the beginning of the presidency of Barack Obama, his hometown, you have to have stop and frisk. You need more police. You need a better community relation. You don't have good community relations in Chicago. It's terrible. I have property there. It's terrible what's going on in Chicago. But when you look, and Chicago's not the only, you go to Ferguson, you go to so many different places. You need better relationships. I agree with Secretary Clinton on this. You need better relationships between the communities and the police because in some cases it's not good.
One of the things Wall Street Journal said is that Donald Trump had a better grasp of the legal history of New York stop and frisk policing than moderator Lester Holt, who took the liberal line that it was declared unconstitutional. That ruling was by a lower court judge whose bias was rebuked by an appellate court, and then New York's new mayor, of course, Blasio, dropped the city's appeal. So this is one time when actually trying to do fact check did more harm than good and just wasted some time and did not allow him to kind of finish his argument. But how are we going to deal with this issue? We seem to be dealing today with what Heather McDonald calls the Ferguson effect. A lot of people in police force are saying, I don't want to be in the next YouTube video that comes out. And so many times they're hesitating. And when we don't use some of the kinds of police techniques and tools that were used in the past to really protect inner city neighborhoods, we are seeing the crime rate go up.
Absolutely. That was another point they disagreed about last night. But in fact, the crime rate is going up, and it's going up in the inner cities especially. And Heather McDonald's book and her writings that basically make the point that when police become afraid they're going to be accused of racism, accused of excessive brutality, they are staying back, and it's actually hurting. The most ironic and unfortunate outcome is hurting the Black community, where they actually, the law-abiding members, which are the majority in those Black communities, they need the police to come and protect them from the criminals. And, there's been discussion on the left about the idea that the term law and order is just a dog whistle for racism. It's kind of a dog whistle signal, says the left, that anyone who advocates is really saying is somehow speaking in racial terms. And that is the ugliest accusation. No one wants, I mean, every law-abiding citizen, no matter what color you came wrapped in, whatever your skin color is, you want to feel safe. You don't want to be in an unsafe situation in your neighborhood. You want to think the police are there. And the idea that somehow are out of, and especially after the riots in Charlotte, North Carolina, where innocent people were dragged out of their cars and beaten, this law and order thing is going to resonate with the American people, despite Hillary's effort to paint it as racist, which it is not. And one of the quick points, if you can stand, I can make one other point, which is, you saw we had 2 instances recently of a police shooting of a young black man. One was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and one was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Well, the Tulsa, Oklahoma shooting was actually one where, we are 10 seconds away. Let me put a comma there. Go ahead. Sorry.
We'll take a break and we'll come back. And we'll give Nick a chance to respond, and we'll get a few more comments from some of you. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Constitution of the United States is becoming a forgotten document. We memorize the preamble and we learn about the Bill of Rights in grade school, but then we tend to forget it. You probably recall that the First Amendment protects against Congress making any law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. But some of the most beautiful protections for religious liberty are found in the constitutions of each state. Arkansas starts by saying, all men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences. Colorado explains that the free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination shall forever hereafter be guaranteed. Many state constitutions explain some of the obvious limits of religious liberty, like Florida. Religious freedom shall not justify practices inconsistent with public morals, peace, or safety. Some, like Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Maine, are short. Others, like Massachusetts and Missouri, go on for paragraphs. Few are as poetic as Virginia. That religion or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence, and therefore all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience, and that it is the mutual duty of all to practice Christian forbearance, love, and charity towards each other. Whether short and sweet, long and elegant, it is reassuring to know that every state government has been founded upon the protection of religious liberty for every citizen in every state. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. We'll try to get in a few phone calls in just a minute. Debbie Georgatos, Nick Pitts, and Debbie, you put a comma in it, and we were talking about two different shootings, one in Charlotte and one in Tulsa, but the reactions have been different. And in some respects, the Tulsa one is really questionable. That woman, I think, fired and should not have. We're still learning more about Charlotte, but what about the reaction? Is there any reason for any of that you can see?
Absolutely. You know, it is interesting because in Tulsa, there were no riots. And as you said, Kirby, a second ago, the shooting there seems more questionable. The officer's actually been indicted on voluntary manslaughter charges. But there were no riots. There was just calm. The community seems to be letting the system handle it. And in Charlotte, where the shooting seems to have been more justified, a gun apparently in the man's hand, we've seen days and days of riots over, and we had nighttime riots. We had buildings burned. We had people dragged out of their cars smashed. And the difference is that North Carolina is a swing state. It is unclear whether it'll go Democrat or Republican. And so George Soros, who funds all sorts of community unrest intentionally. In fact, he funded something in the range of $33 million just in Ferguson, paying people to protest. This is what's happening. This is an intentionally agitated protest in Charlotte. Everyone, want anyone to lose their life. It isn't that anyone's life doesn't matter, because everyone's life matters. But the question whether the police acted wrongly is being stirred up among the black community there by paid agitators. And it's a political issue. It's not a racial issue.
Wow. 70%, huh? That's interesting.
70% of people arrested had out-of-state IDs. Weren't even from North Carolina.
Yeah. And again, we mentioned some of that on Friday with Kelly Shackelford, but you're reaffirming some of those same ideas. Nick, just before we take some phone calls, any thoughts?
Yeah, I love what Donald Trump said relative to the idea of pointing out and giving a shout out, I guess you could say, to Dallas and to Chief Brown and what's been done so well there, of being able to have the change affected at the local levels first. Federal level, it's just so far separated from the communities, for better or for worse. But at the local level is really the opportunity for relationships to be able to be formed and to understand that police are never called to birthday parties.
Yeah.
Police are always called to breakdowns in the system, and in the breakdowns, they're trying to keep the peace. And so it's not really a celebration time that they come in. So we need to try to think the best when we're looking towards police.
Very good. Let's take some phone calls. We'll go out to California first. Leonard, thank you for joining us today. What would you like to add to our conversation?
Well, thank you for having me on your program, Kirby. I would like to say that Hillary Clinton does not have a clue as to what is going on in the inner cities at all. I mean, what we have there are citizens, American citizens, black, Spanish, whatever, who are in these areas, law-abiding citizens, being controlled by gangs. These gangs do not want the police to come into these areas because they want the control of these areas. Now, these people, the police, are not just afraid of their reputations for whatever reason that they might go in there and be accused of. They are afraid for their lives when they go in there, and they are truly taking their lives in their own hands.
Lots of times they're outgunned too, aren't they?
Pardon?
They're outgunned sometimes too, aren't they? I know that some of these gangs carry levels of weapons and assault weapons and things like that oftentimes even police officers are not given.
That is true. And when they talk about shootings, police shootings and what have you, in these areas, they are, in terms of numbers, very low compared to racial shootings among the races themselves. And this is what the police are trying to control. But they are, because these gangs are inciting people to keep the police out. And I don't think Hillary Clinton has any concept of that. But when somebody says also that the federal government cannot control this, I look back into the 1930s when we had serious problems with gangs, and they were white gangs, robbing banks and what have you. The federal government did do something about it, and they were capable of doing it. And I think they're still capable of doing it.
Well, Leonard, I appreciate you sharing some of that. And again, we're going to come back to this issue of racial relations. But one topic that we've mentioned but never really got into today is the whole issue of religious liberty. And Cal Thomas, who's been on the program with us before, I've known him for a long time, said that if Hillary Clinton wins in November, government will grow bigger and more expensive, with all of her investment ideas. But then he goes on to say the religious liberty issue needs to be brought front and center. And he points out what is going to happen in Massachusetts this Saturday. Starting October 1st, you have all sorts of new LGBT laws, some of which I wrote today on the commentary. And he says 17 U.S. states have similar laws to the ones in Massachusetts, just that Massachusetts has said that a church is a public accommodation. And he says if Hillary gets to appoint justices to the Supreme Court, we'll all be forced to accept this. Isn't that an issue that needs to come up in one of these campaigns?
It sure does. And it just seems like it's a kind of issue that used to be so common sense that you wouldn't have given it a thought that there would be a problem there. But now we have, in just a very short time in America, had public thought shifted to where people are uncomfortable saying publicly, this is with respect to the public accommodations, including restrooms and showers and all that, right? Okay. I mean, I just think that the concept, no, are you saying no?
No, I'm just shaking my head because I can't believe it myself.
You're flabbergasted. Yeah. The notion that a young girl, a teenage girl, should have to allow a anatomical male to take a shower next to her, change in the locker room next to her, is abhorrent to normal norms of decency, of Christian decency, of just the kind of things you try to teach your children when they're growing up. And so, but the idea now is the norm is that you must accept gender confusion. You must accept people choosing what gender they think they are that day, and accommodate that, or else you're the one who's out of line. The logic and reason and kind of human normalcy has been shifted on its head.
Yeah, in my commentary, I talk about the fact that you have to use the right pronouns and to have the right changing rooms, locker rooms, and restrooms for people that is consistent with their gender identity. Well, churches right now are doing things that would be considered an open forum and open to the public. So they probably would allow people that are transgender to come and sit in the congregation. But I think they're going to balk at bathrooms, locker rooms. They're going to balk at having to use the right biology, the right gender nouns instead of the biology. And most importantly, if they are sitting in that congregation and somebody preaches on Romans 1, that's it, right?
Hate speech.
Yeah. G.K. Chesterton said it best, right? Tolerance is the virtue with the man with no convictions. Yeah. And so, as we saw detailed last week with the report, religion contributes $1.2 trillion to our U.S. economy. Mm-hmm. And that's not just limited to Christianity. Being a person that's a very strong advocate of religious liberty, I'm an equal proponent of, from the Buddhist to the Muslim to the Christian to the atheist, they should be free to be able to practice whatever religion that they see fit. Because even our founders understood that religion is a positive good to society because it produces virtue. And virtue is a good ally to a good government. And so we want to be proponents of religious liberty.
So again, in the next debate, maybe they'll talk about whether or not religious liberty is just code words for bigotry and those kinds of things. But that's another issue that did not get covered. Well, one last time, if you would like to know a little bit more about these guests that we have in studio today, first of all, let me encourage you to go to Debbie's website, americacanwetalk.org, and you can find out more about her radio program. And then, of course, we have the Denison Forum, which is on denisonforum.org, the Denison Forum on Truth and Culture. And so I want to thank both of you for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
We will get back to some of the other issues in the news tomorrow. And, of course, we'll have our Friday weekend edition. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for the help behind the scenes. Visit our website, pointofview.net, and find out more about the election. And hope some of you will join us on the Alaska cruise in August. We'll say goodbye for today. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
This election has been one of the most divisive in history. Even close friends have been driven apart because they dared support the wrong candidate. Jesus said the world would know his disciples by how they love each other. I'm asking you to do something today as a sign of unity. Step up and support the Truth Team at Point of View Radio so we can be a beacon of truth in 2016 and beyond. America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. Visit pointofview.net. Make a difference by giving as generously as you can, or call us 800. President will likely appoint at least 2 Supreme Court justices, maybe even more. We need each other. And I believe that we need Point of View, and Point of View needs you to invest in the mission. Please join us today, pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.